Hare Krishna. Thank you so much for joining. Sitarani Mataji, Rogi Mataji, Malini and Sirisha Mataji. So I'll start with the Mangalacharan prayers and hopefully we have devotees join. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guroho Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tvam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Shri Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhayascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivas Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Matsamo nasti papatma naparadhi cha kaschana parihare pilajjame kimbruve purushottama bhumau skalitapadanam bhumireva valambanam tvai jata paradhanam tvameva sharanam prabhu govinda vallabhe radhe prarthayet pamaham sada Tvadiyam iti janathu Govindo mam tvaya saha Radha radhita radhesha Radhika prana vallabha Radha ramana vandetvam Radhika premanuchita. So we can pull up, if possible, the Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Lila and text chapter 1 and text 12, 1:12 of Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Lila. And I also welcome all the devotees who just joined. Thank you, Ram Priyapu, Gandharvika Mataji, Paragorani Mataji, Venugita Mataji, and John. Hare Krishna. So today is the most auspicious day of the appearance of Srila Advaita Acharya Prabhu. And by the mercy of that great personality and by the mercy of our spiritual masters, I hope to speak something glorifying Srila Advaita Acharya. Please forgive me for my inability and deficient character to properly glorify, but this is a humble attempt to glorify so that we can remember and get inspiration from Advaita Acharya Prabhu in our own spiritual life. So if you can pull up Thank you. Can Malini, can you just call and just repeat for the first verse, please?
Sure.
Mahavishnur Jagatkarta
Mahavishnur Jagatkarta
Mayaya Srijatyadaha
Mayaya Srijatyadaha
Tasyavatara Evayam
Tasyavatara Evayam
Advaita Acharya Ishvaraha.
Advaita Acharya Ishvaraha.
Translation, please.
Lord Advaita Acharya is an incarnation of Mahavishnu, whose main function is to create the cosmic world through the actions of Maya.
Thank you. Kandarika Mataji, can we do the next verse, please? Kandarika Mataji, are you there? Or you can you or can you? You're on mute.
I was on mute, sorry.
No problem.
Advaitam Harinadvaitad Acharyam Bhakti Samshamsanat Bhaktavataram Isham Tam Advaitacharyam Ashraye. Because he is non-different from Hari, the Supreme Lord, he is called Advaita. And because he propagates the cult of devotion, he is called Acharya. He is the Lord and the incarnation of the Lord's devotee. Therefore, I take shelter of him.
Thank you. So, Srila Advaita Acharya Prabhu was an incarnation of Mahavishnu. And the famous verse we hear in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhaktarupa Swarupakam Bhaktavatara Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam, which is that Krishna, or the Supreme Absolute Truth, reveals himself in 5 features. The Lord himself, his energies, his expansions, his devotees, and his devotional energy. So Advaita Acharya Prabhu is called the Bhaktavatara, which is the incarnation of the devotional energy of the Lord. And he, from the Tattva perspective, he is non-different from Mahavishnu, who is in charge of this cosmic manifestation. And at other places, it's mentioned that he's a combination of Shiva and Vishnu, the Rudra Tattva. So both are needed for the creation of this universe. And Advaita Acharya Prabhu is the personification of that energy of creation of this material world. So Srila Advaita Acharya Prabhu was born in Navagram in Bangladesh in 1434 to a very pious parents. And when he was born, he had beautiful features and his eyes were like lotus petals. And the parents, seeing the beauty of the child, they named him Kamalaksha. And in some other books, it's mentioned that he was named Kamalakanta. But nevertheless, that was the name that was given to Srila Advaita Acharya. And growing up, he was amazingly proficient in all scriptures. By the time he was 8 or 9, he became very proficient in all the scriptures. And he had this tremendous energy and effulgence that people couldn't fathom, that he was a very special personality. In fact, there is a story of how during the Durga Puja procession was going on, and everybody was bowing down to Durga, But Advaita Acharya Prabhu did not, or Kamalaksha at that point of time, he did not bow down. And everybody forced him to kind of bow down. And, feeling little obligated to do so, he bows down to the form of Durga Devi, and the Durga Devi's murti actually bursts into thousands of pieces, and people were amazed by this particular incident. In any case, after some time, his parents give up this world, and Advaita Acharya Prabhu, or Kamalaksha at that point of time, he starts traveling to different places of pilgrimage. And he comes in, and we hear of Advaita Vat in Vrindavan, and that was the place where Advaita Acharya Prabhu came and performed his bhajan. So he traveled to different places, and by special providence, he met Srila Madhavendra Puri. Madhavendra Puri was an exalted personality, and he was the origin of the pure love of Godhead. We are from the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya, and Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya, in the line of Madhva, Madhavendra Puri was the first personality actually to prominently feature the love of Godhead as the primary goal of the Vedas, or the most confidential goal of the Vedas. So Madhavendra Puri met Advaita Acharya in Vrindavan, but at that point of time, he didn't initiate, though he gave the name. Madhavendra Puri, he said, "You are an ocean of mercy, and your name should be Advaita because you are not different from the Supreme Lord. And also, you propagate the cult of devotion because of your infinite compassion towards all living entities. So you are an Acharya." And so therefore that name came, but he didn't take formal initiation at that particular point of time. But then Advaita Acharya Prabhu toured different places of pilgrimage. And then he came back to Shantipur, and he married the mother of the universe, Sita Thakurani, and they had 6 children. So in Shantipur, he was the leader of all the Brahmin community. He was a very powerful voice, and throughout day and night, he would be absorbed in talking about Krishna, and he would be discussing Krishna with a group of his intimate associates. Then he saw in this world at that point of time had become so degraded that people were worshipping so many demigods. They were doing so many animal sacrifices in the name of Vedas. And the purpose of religion was diverted just for sense gratification and aggrandizement. There was hardly any name of Krishna, nor there was any mention of devotional service to Krishna. So this pained so much Advaita Acharya Prabhu that he looking at this condition, he said that unless Krishna comes himself to deliver and to give love of Godhead, it's impossible for the people of Kali Yuga to be delivered, because this age of Kali, or the Iron Age, is a very troublesome age for just living. Yes or yes, just to maintain one's existence itself is troublesome. What to speak of, having some glimpse or even performing some spiritual life. But Advaita Acharya Prabhu fervently prayed on the bank of Ganges, fasting, offering tulsi and water to the Supreme Lord, because he learned from the scriptures where it's mentioned that merely by offering tulsi and some water, one can purchase the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Advaita Acharya Prabhu was fervently pleading and crying for Krishna to come. And he was doing it on behalf of the fallen condition of this material world. And that is the nature of the elevated Vaishnavas. their trouble that they take compassion is for the fallen souls like me in this particular material world. So when he prayed with such fervent heart, Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared on the lunar eclipse in the month of Magh, and we will do the beautiful Gaur Purnima festival that's going to come next month. Following the cries, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came, as we know. There were three internal reasons and three external reasons why he appeared in this material world. And amongst the external reasons, one of the external reasons was the fervent plea and the crying out of Advaita Acharya, begging the Lord to come to this material world. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was born, and Advaita Acharya and Sita Thakurani, they went to the house of Jagannath Mishra and Sachi Mata, bearing wonderful gifts for the newborn child. Before that, or before the advent of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sachi Mata and Jagannath Mishra had one more son, elder to Vishwambhar, or his name was Vishwambhar. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was given many names. He was given the name Nimai. He was given the name Vishwambhar, and his elder brother was Vishwarup. Vishwarup was completely a detached soul right from the beginning, and he had no interest in this material world, seeing this material world as a barren, uninteresting place. He would daily go to the house of Srila Advaita Acharya, and from morning to evening, they would be having wonderful discussions of Krishna. They would be discussing the pastimes of Krishna. And then Sachimata and Jagannath Mishra, when Vishwarup came of age, they started making plans of getting him married. And when Vishwarup heard this, he was not at all pleased. And he gave up the residence in Navadvip, and he went to the forest to take sannyas. And he got the name Shankararanya. Sachi Mata and Jagannath Mishra were very much grieved. And the heart was broken. And Vishwambhar, or Chaitanya Mahaprabhu at that time, he said that, don't worry, I'm here to take care. But in any case, there were many pastimes of Advaita Acharya. One of the pastimes was his, he was, as I mentioned earlier, the leader of all the Brahmin communities. And one of the biggest, or one of the big observances every year was the Shraddh ceremony. And the prasadam would be made, and a plate of prasadam would be made as Mahaprasadam and would be offered to the Lord. And the whole of Brahman community would be invited to partake of the prasadam that was cooked. But the plate of Mahaprasadam would be given to the most elevated, to the most knowledgeable, and to the most advanced of the Brahman community. And amongst one of the, some scriptures say that Srila Haridas Thakur was a disciple of Advaita Acharya. But in any case, Advaita Acharya, when he came back to Shantipur, just going back a little, Madhavendra Puri actually visits Shantipur and gives Advaita Acharya his initiation before he goes off to the tour of South India. And Advaita Acharya actually had taken Haridas Thakur under his shelter. And every single day, they would be discussing the pastimes of Krishna, Haridas Thakur and Advaita Acharya. And when the time for the Shraddh ceremony came, so who would be given the main plate of Mahaprasadam? And Advaita Acharya actually took that plate and gave it to Haridas Thakur. in front of all the Brahmin community. And we understand that Haridas Thakur was born in a Mlechar Yaman family. And by birth, he was a kind of outcast. And this created shock. But Advaita Acharya Prabhu, he quoting Bhagavatam, he gave this plate of prasadam to Haridas Thakur, and thus thereby establishing the fact that a Vaishnava who is born in a family of non-Brahmins is higher than a person born in the so-called Brahmin family. And there are many proofs in Srimad Bhagavatam as well that highlight this wonderful point. And so Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared on the fervent plea of Advaita Acharya. And many wonderful pastimes occurred. And we know the story of how Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in the earlier part of his life, he enacted the pastime of a proud and arrogant scholar, and how he went to Gaya, and how he met Srila Ishvara Puri, and how he became transformed. And he became a God-intoxicated personality. And when he came back to Navadvip, he was every day performing pastimes in the house of Srivas Thakur, the kirtans, all-night kirtans that were going on. Advaita Acharya Prabhu had both houses in Shantipur and Navadvip, and when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was born, he predominantly stayed in Navadvip so that he could be near Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And at that point of time, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was freely performing pastimes. And because he was much older in terms of age, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would always be treating Advaita Acharya with great reverence, with great awe and respect. He would never treat him as his servant. And we earlier heard about the fact that Nityananda Prabhu, Advaita Prabhu, they always yearned to serve Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Supreme Absolute Truth. In the form of Mahavishnu, he doesn't become a menial servant of the Supreme Absolute Truth, Krishna, even though we hear the story in the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam of how the Lord Krishna, he visited Mahavishnu. But Mahavishnu was very formal, and it was like a guest receiving a guest. But this Advaita Acharya was burning with this desire that I am the servant of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and I should be serving him. Chaitanya Radashmui, Chaitanya Radash, Chaitanya Radashmui Tar Dasher Anudash. So that was his mentality. And it is mentioned in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita that the pure love of Krishna has one unique quality, and it imbues everyone, the inferiors or the subordinates, not the inferiors, the subordinates, the superiors, and the equals of Krishna with a desire to serve Krishna. And here we can see that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was so respectful, was so deferential, and so submissive to Advaita Acharya. And Advaita Acharya Prabhu was not liking this. And we'll have two pastimes to kind of get into that fact. So when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was performing all-night kirtans at Srivas Thakur's house, one day he fainted in ecstasy, and Advaita Acharya Prabhu took this as an opportunity. He crept and slowly took the dust from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and put it on his head. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to the external consciousness. And Advaita Acharya Prabhu was saying that, now I have stolen from the thief himself. And he was feeling very happy and blissful. keep taking the dust from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's lotus feet and putting it on his head. And of course, we know the story of how Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to his external consciousness, and he said, "Who did this act of taking dust from my feet?" And all the devotees became very shivering and silent, and they didn't want to displease Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu by pointing at the fingers at Advaita Acharya, or kind of deny anything. So Advaita Acharya, feeling the predicament of all these Vaishnavas, assembled Vaishnavas, he said, "Lord, I stole the dust from your lotus feet." And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu felt very embarrassed and ashamed, and he tried to really, he became morose and wanted to end his life in Ganges. And of course, the devotees pacified him and brought him back. And Advaita Acharya Prabhu, because he left, and then Advaita Acharya Prabhu fasted for that time. But then later, things were settled, and the blissful kirtans continued at Srivas Angam. And there were such wonderful pastimes that were happening as well. And then after, we know the story of how Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he took sannyas. And he took sannyas in Katwa. He shaved his head. And we know the story of how he just tells where his very confidential associates, and they go with him to Katwa. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu takes the sannyas from Keshava Bharati. And one pastime I forgot to tell before that is that while Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is in Navadvip, we know the story of how Nityananda Prabhu is touring all the holy places of pilgrimage. And when he finally makes his appearance in Navadvip, there is a beautiful and ecstatic meeting of the Lord and his expansion, that is Nimai and Nitai meet. And there is such a beautiful description of how the two lords, they stare into each other, and they are breaking into love of Godhead, and how there is shivering, and they are rolling on the ground, and they're weeping and they're crying. And then, but with Advaita Acharya and Nityananda Prabhu, there is a friendly fight going on. One day they sit for prasadam, and Advaita Acharya Prabhu starts, he says, "I'm sitting next to a person of unknown caste." He's saying about Nityananda Prabhu. He's supposed to be an avadut, but he's, just not having any saffron clothes. He just is going all over the country. Nobody knows what his caste is. So I'm a high-class Brahmana, and then I don't know what will happen to me if I sit and eat next to him. And then Advaita and then Nityananda Prabhu is saying that you are a monist, you are a Mayavadi person, and if I sit and eat next to you, then I don't know how my mind is going to be transformed. And they were having these friendly fights, and it's a rasa that Advaita Acharya Prabhu and Nityananda Prabhu had. And Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, he warns us that one should never take sides when these two great personalities are having an apparent disagreement or argument. So this rasa of Advaita Acharya and Nityananda Prabhu, would continue for a long time, even when later part of when they visited Jagannath Puri, when Mahaprabhu took sannyas. But that is for the later story. So coming back to the story of Mahaprabhu taking sannyas, Mahaprabhu took sannyas in Katwa, and he was absorbed in ecstasy of love of God, and he said, I'm going to Vrindavan. And he started towards Vrindavan, and how Nityananda Prabhu tricked Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And as he was walking along the bank of Ganges, Nityananda Prabhu said, yes, it's Yamuna and it's Vrindavan. And they turn their journey, and somehow or other, Nityananda Prabhu brings Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to the house of Advaita Acharya in Shantipur. And because the Lord has been fasting for 3 days, he didn't eat anything. So they cross the river and Advaita Acharya meets Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is surprised. Advaita, what are you doing in Vrindavan? And he says, no, my Lord, this is not Vrindavan, this is Shantipur. And then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu smiles. He says, Nityananda Prabhu tricked me. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu goes into the house of Advaita Acharya, and the Advaita Acharya invites the Lords, and there is a delicious feast that is prepared. And a word is also sent to Sachimata in the meanwhile, so that Sachimata can come to the house of Advaita Acharya and she can cook for her son for one final time. And she says to the devotees that please give me this charity, that as long as my son is here, I will cook for him. And everybody agrees to her request. And that is the last time that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, at least in the physical plane, sees his mother. And then after that beautiful pastime, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, there he receives the instructions from his mother saying that, you are going to Vrindavan, but if you go to Vrindavan, then I'll never hear about you. But if you at least stay in Jagannath Puri, it is like two rooms in the same house. So the devotees are coming back and forth, and I'll have some news about you. In those days, we didn't have FaceTime back then. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu agrees, and he starts going towards Jagannath Puri. We know the story of how for 3 or 4 months every year, the devotees from Bengal, Navadvip and Shantipur and Kulinagram, and so many other places, they would go in a group and meet Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and celebrate the Rath Yatra festival with him. And Advaita Acharya Prabhu would also go every year. And usually Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's lunch invitations were so packed that every day, barely anybody could get a chance just like that to serve lunch to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So one day Advaita Acharya, he invites Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu for lunch. And Mahaprabhu would never go by himself to the lunch. Usually he would have 10 or 20 sannyasis that would go with him. So Advaita Acharya, he invited, and he knew the Lord was coming, and he and Sita Thakurani Mata started cooking early in the morning and with a lot of preparations for Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And then when the time comes for all these sannyasis to come, there was rain. There was such pouring of rain, and it was so blinding. The storm was so blinding. Actually, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu starts, and others were supposed to come, but he reaches, and as soon as he reaches, then there is this blinding rain and storm, and the sannyasis cannot come. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu tells Advaita Acharya, this is your trick. You are Lord Vishnu. You deliberately created this rain and hailstorm so that you have the pleasure to just serve me alone, not with everyone else. As Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would eat prasadam, but it would be more of a formal occasion. So Advaita Acharya tricked like that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Another pastime that happens is that there is a story. Advaita Acharya, there was he had a servant called Kamalakanta Vishwas. and he was intimately familiar with Advaita Acharya's affairs, and he goes to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This is towards the very end. He goes to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he mentions to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that Advaita Acharya has a debt of 300 rupees, and that needs to be repaid. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is very upset. He says, "How dare you call that Mahavishnu as somebody who's in a debt and a poor person?" And he tells Govinda that from this day onwards, please don't allow that Baulia, Kamalakant Vishwas, to come, because he dared say that that Mahavishnu is poor and he's in debt. So please don't allow him to come. And when Kamalakant Vishwas hears this, he becomes very upset and distressed. And at that point of time, Advaita Acharya says to him, "You are so fortunate that you have been punished by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It's the supreme benediction to be punished by the Supreme Absolute Truth. I didn't have that good fortune. I actually had to get that good fortune, and I had to take a devious method to kind of get that good fortune. And this is what Advaita Acharya Prabhu does. Seeing that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is giving him too much of respect and honor and distinction and adoration, he goes back to Shantipur and he starts collecting big group of people. And he starts telling them about Gyan, the path of Gyan, and how the Brahman is the supreme and the Gyan is the supreme. And he kind of denigrates or belittles or puts bhakti or pure devotional service to Krishna in the lower status, but he starts preaching about Gyan. And then Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu hears this and he becomes furious. And then he goes to the place where Advaita Acharya is preaching about this monistic philosophy, and he jumps onto that stage and he asks Advaita Acharya, "What is the highest realization? What is the highest path?" And Advaita Acharya says, "It is Gyan. It is Gyan only. Realization of Brahman is the highest." And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu cannot hold himself, and he starts beating Advaita Acharya then and there. And then Sita Thakurani comes running. "Lord, please spare him. He's an old man. If you beat him, then he will die. Please, please, please spare him." And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is somewhat embarrassed. And then Advaita Acharya smirks. He says, "Ha, now where is all your adoration gone? Where is all your puja for me gone? And this is the bliss." And then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is somewhat embarrassed. And you can see how it is mentioned that Advaita Acharya actually invoked the mood of punishment or from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and felt supreme bliss. In our own course, we can see sometimes Krishna is putting us through tests, putting us through indecisions in life, putting us through situations that, whether be it health or be it career or be it family or, be it financial, there can be many ups and downs. We can take it sometimes as the mercy of the Lord. It is hard, but at least if we have that realization, then we make great spiritual progress by that attitude. And that's what is mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam as well. Tatteno kampam susamikshamanam gunjana evatma kritam vipakam hridvagva purbhir midunam namaste jivetayo mukti pade sadayava. That the jiva, the meaning for that particular verse is that one who endures the difficult situations, thinking as the result of one's own action of the past, and patiently and earnestly waits for the mercy of the Supreme Lord, becomes the true recipient and the guaranteed recipient of the Lord's mercy. But Advaita Acharya there is no question of karma for him. He is Mahavishnu. He is beyond all karmic reactions. So he enacted this wonderful pastime to taste the flavor. And we can see how the whole of Panchatattva or the Prabhus of Panchatattva were always eager to serve Mahaprabhu, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. There were many wonderful other pastimes as well. The Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's devotees, they used to clean the Gundicha temple together along with Advaita Acharya. And later they used to go to Narendra Sarovar to have bath. And at that time also, Nityananda Prabhu and Advaita Prabhu, they would be splashing waters on each other's and calling each other's names and using abusive language against each other's. And as in abusive in the sense, it would be very, very endearing. And that was Advaita Acharya. One of the most important lessons that we learn from the so Sirisha Mataji, when do we need to stop?
Not sure. Gandharvika Mataji will let us know.
Dandavats Prabhu. Yesterday Nirakula Mataji didn't give an end time, so it's up to you, Prabhu.
I see.
Whenever you feel like you're done. Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. One of the most important lessons that we learn from the life of Advaita Acharya Prabhu or the pastimes is the chastisement of the Lord of Sachimata. So the story goes something like this. Oh, Hare Krishna, Govinda Charan Prabhu and Chinkita Mataji. So happy to see you all. Ram Babu.
Yeah, Prabhu.
Dandatam Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. So Vishwarup, as I mentioned earlier, would go to the house of Srila Advaita Acharya throughout the day. He would not be doing anything else. And when Vishwarup was really young, and they would be constantly discussing, and they would be engrossed in the topics of Krishna. The same parallel goes in Srimad Bhagavatam, where it is mentioned, Iti Nandadayo Gopya, Krishna Rama Katam Muda, Kurvanto Rama Manascha, Na Vindan Bhava Vedanam. The translation is, Iti Nandadaya. Thus, in this way, the cowherd men of Vrindavan, they used to discuss the pastimes of Krishna and Rama with great pleasure. And by doing that, they would be not feeling any pains of this material world. Na Vindan Bhava Vedanam. Bhava Vedanam. Vedanam is pain or troubles or tribulations. Bhava is the ocean of birth and death. Na Vindan means they wouldn't even know. So similarly, Advaita Acharya and Vishwarup and other devotees would be constantly discussing the names of Krishna and the holy forms, the pastimes of Krishna, and they would be forgetting the material mysteries. And Vishwarup would be there all day long, and Mother Sachimata would make lunch, and then we know how mothers wouldn't eat till their children eat. So she would send young Nimai, who was just 4 or 5 years old at that point of time. He would say, please go to the house of Advaita Acharya and bring your elder brother Vishwarup for lunch. Your father has been waiting for them to come and eat, so please go. And little Gauranga at that point of time, Nimai was little, he would go, and then he would go to the house of Advaita Acharya, and he would pull his brother's dhoti. Mother is calling, please, let's go and take prasadam. Father is waiting, come, let's go. And as soon as this child Nimai would enter into the assembly of Advaita Acharya, everybody would forget about everything, even Krishna Katha, because they were staring unblinkingly at this beautiful child. It's as if the fructification of their sadhana, and not sadhana, but their discussions of pastimes of Krishna have been, fructified by getting the darshan of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So beautiful was the boy that they would even forget about Krishna. And he's like such a beautiful child. But in any case, he would pull the dhoti and say, let's go, please, let's go. And then Vishwarup would go home. He would take prasadam and go right back to Advaita Acharya Prabhu's house. And as I told the story earlier about how his parents, that is Jagannath Mishra and Sachi Mata, were making plans for Vishwarup to get married. Or then he heard about those plans and he was intensely displeased. He went to the forest to take sannyas. And the parents were aggrieved. Mother Sachi had her doubts whether Advaita Acharya was the cause behind her son taking sannyas, but she didn't say anything at that point of time. She just withheld back. Then we know the story of how Jagannath Mishra passed away and he returned to the spiritual abode. And Mother Sachi had only Nimai. This widowed mother had only Nimai. And when Nimai took sannyas, then she became very disturbed. And she started complaining to the people, saying that this Advaita is not Advaita, he's Dvaita. He's two-faced person. I am a widowed mother. I have no other shelter or support. And he induced or brainwashed, not induced my eldest son to go to forest. And now he's doing the same to my second son. And then much later, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did the 21-hour festival where he was giving freely benedictions to all the devotees, all the devotees said, my Lord, you need to give mercy to your mother, Sachi Mata. Now she is your mother. And then Mahaprabhu said, no, I'm not going to give mercy to my mother because she committed offense. Oh, my Lord, what offense? She's the mother of universe. How can you say this? He said, no, she committed offense against Advaita Acharya by saying these things. If Advaita Acharya forgives her, then I'll give her love of Godhead. And Advaita Acharya, of course, said, my Lord, please, just I forgive her. And then you can see the story of how Mahaprabhu withheld the mercy of his own mother when Advaita Acharya Prabhu was, it was the words were completely justified, but the intent or the truth was not in what was not correct, as Advaita Acharya was not guilty of what she mentioned. But you can see how in the past time Advaita Acharya Prabhu forgave Mother Sachi and how he got love of Godhead. This is an important lesson for us to remember on how we do our best to kind of not offend the devotees if we have to make some progress in spiritual life. Of course, I have a long ways to go on that front, on a personal front, but I pray to Sri Advaita Acharya that may he overlook and forgive all the offenses. So this was another beautiful pastime. Jagadananda Pandit was an interesting personality, one of the intimate associates of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In Krishna's Leela, he was Satyabhama, and he would show his nature in Chaitanya Leela. He would be staying with Mahaprabhu in Jagannath Puri, and Mahaprabhu had taken sannyas, And for bed, he would be sleeping on the hard, very, very hard floor. And Jagadananda Pandit would try to get him mattress, would try to get him all sorts of comfort, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would say, I'm not a sannyasi. You shouldn't be getting this, and Jagadananda Pandit would get angry. So one day he was deputed by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to go to Navadvip and to tell the news of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu every year to Mother Sachi, and then come back to Jagannath Puri. So one day he actually, when he was coming back from Bengal, he got very fine, good quality sandalwood oil. And this was an excellent sandalwood oil. He got the oil with the hope that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, applies it on his body, and it would give him some relief. And so he got it, and he said to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, "This is some oil, sandalwood oil from Bengal. Please apply it." And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, "I'm a sannyasi. If I start applying perfumes on my body, people will laugh at me. And what next? Maybe some massage. This is not the proper thing for sannyasi, and I'm not going to accept this." And Jagadananda Pandit becomes so furious. He just takes the sandalwood pot and just smashes it to the ground, and all the oil would go everywhere. And he went back to his home, and for 3 days he shut the door, and for 3 days he fasted. He was not eating. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he went to Jagadananda Pandit. He said, "Look, I'm coming to your home for prasadam. Please make me prasadam." And Jagadananda Pandit was very ecstatic at hearing Mahaprabhu would come. He kept his anger aside and he cooked wonderful feast. And when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came for lunch, he would go, every day he would have a regular pattern that he would go see the deity of Lord Jagannath. He would do his afternoon duties, and he would go home to the lunch wherever he was invited. And when Jagadananda Pandit's home he went, Jagadananda Pandit had cooked amazing prasadam, and he started feeding Chaitanya Mahaprabhu more and more and more. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was so full. He was afraid. If I say no to Jagadananda Pandit about this prasadam, he'll start fasting again. So he'll eat more than what he can eat. And after some time, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, "Jagadananda, you have fed me 10 times more than what I can eat. Now it is time for you to eat." And so that was the relationship that was happening. And one year, when Jagadananda Pandit was in Bengal, he was with Sachimata and other devotees, and he took permission to come back to Jagannath Puri, where Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was there. And many devotees give many gifts, and Advaita Acharya actually gave a message to be given to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And the message was very vague and very puzzling. And Jagadananda Pandit, he looked at the message, he didn't understand, he just laughed. And then he got the message to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's, the message was read to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and the message was that, you have intoxicated everybody in the world with love of Godhead, and everybody has become mad. And there is no demand for rice in the market anymore. And this is also signed by a person who is mad in love of Godhead. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he heard about it and he smiled and he thought for a while. Swarup Damodar, who was his constant companion, asked him, "What is the meaning of this?" And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, "That is order." And that was an indication by Advaita Acharya to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that he can wind up his earthly pastimes. In fact, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, when Swarup Damodar asks, what is the meaning of this vague sonnet which was written by Advaita Acharya? He says Advaita Acharya is an expert in deity worship. He brings the deity, he calls the deity to come, and he gives wonderful prasadam and does some prayers and puja, and then later he will ask the deity to go. How do I know what is there? And you can see how Advaita Acharya Prabhu was not only instrumental in asking Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to appear, but also for his departure as well. And in the Antya Leela, it's mentioned of how after he receives that message from Advaita Acharya, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's transcendental madness increases double. Day and night, he's absorbed in love of Godhead. So on this day, these are some little pastimes of Advaita Acharya Prabhu. Please forgive me if I have made any mistakes or committed anything wrong. But we pray on this day that that we are so fortunate, we are so grateful to Sri Advaita Acharya Prabhu that by your earnest prayers, by your earnest desire to deliver poor fallen souls like me, that you invited Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to come. And when he came, he gave the highest benediction, which is pure love of Godhead. Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratvishe Namaha. And it's also mentioned in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Chirada Dattam Nijagupta Vittam Swaprema Nama Amritamatyadara Apamaram Yovitatara Gaura Krishna Jinebhyastanam Tamaham Prapatye. That Chirad Adattam. Adattam means not given. Chirad means for a very long time. What is not given? Swaprema Nama. His own love name, which is imbued with love. So Prema Nama Amritamatyadara. And very munificent and magnificent. Apamaram yo vitatara gaura. That even to the lowest of the men, he gave this mercy of pure love of Godhead. So that is possible by the efforts of Advaita Acharya. In fact, one thing I forgot to mention was during the pastime of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu physically assaulting Advaita Acharya, when he was preaching monastic philosophy, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, I was in Vaikunta, happily resting. You asked me to come all the way here, and now because of you, I came, and now you are preaching this monist philosophy. So that is the power of Sri Advaita Prabhu, and we are eternally grateful to him. And on this holy day, we pray to Advaita Acharya Prabhu to help us understand the mystery and the munificence of Nityananda and Gauranga, because it's mentioned in the song Daya Karo Shri Acharya. No, what is that? Daya Karo Sitapati Advaita Gosha Tava Kripa Balepa Chaitanya Nita. So it is the mercy. We are praying that, Advaita Acharya, please shower your mercy on us. Please shower your grace on us. Without your grace, we cannot understand who Nityananda and who Gauranga Mahaprabhu are. So with that, I am deeply grateful to each and every one of you for joining. And please forgive me for any mistakes or offenses. Srila Advaita Acharya Prabhu ki jai.
Srivas Pandit Prabhu ki jai. Thank you so much, Prabhu, for reminding us about Advaita Acharya on this auspicious.
Jai.
Thank you. Any other things? Any questions or any comments? Govind Sharan Prabhu, would you like to add anything?
Thank you, Prabhu, for the wonderful lecture. Actually, I was not aware of this pastime that you mentioned about Lord Advaita Acharya asking the Lord to also leave. That's very sobering to know that. So we cannot think that he only invited. He has the power to also, ask the Lord to leave. So he's that powerful. That's wonderful. And the past time you mentioned, it also shows how we are always so eager for respect, whereas Advaita Acharya is showing how to see the Lord's mercy even in chastisement. That's very, very instructive also. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you so much. And any pastime or any thoughts or any other pastimes you would like to add, Prabhu?
No, bro, I think you covered everything.
All right.
Thank you. And your delivery reminded me so much of His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj's lecture with the sweetness and the relishing of pastimes. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu. Gandarika Mataji, you are the MC. What next? We can stop here then.
Sure, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, if you don't mind, just now you mentioned bhajan, right? Advaita Gosai.
Yeah.
This bhajan start with Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Dayakaram. Could you please, can you sing, Prabhuji, this bhajan?
Sure, Mataji. If that's okay, because we don't have the jamulus and other things, I'll just sing so that it'll be really quick, and also there is no call and respond kind of thing. Is that okay? Or do you want to do the call and respond? Sitarani Mataji, you're okay to do the call and respond?
Yeah, sure, Prabhuji.
Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Daya Karo More.
Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Daya Karo More.
Tuma vina ke dayalu Jagat samsare.
Tuma bina ke dayalu Jagat samsare.
Patita pavana hetu Avayavatara.
Patita pavana hetu Tava avatara.
Moshama patita prabho napaiveara.
Mosama patita Prabhu napai biara.
Mahaprabhu Nityananda Premananda Sukhi.
Aha Prabhu Nityananda Premananda Sukhi.
Kripa karo kana baro ami boro dukhi.
Kripa bhalo kana karo ami bharo dukhi.
Doya karo sitapati Advaita Gosha.
Daya karo Sitapati Advaita Gosai.
Prabha Kripa Bole Pai Chaitanya Nitai.
Prabha Kripa Bole Pai Chaitanya Nitai.
Mahashwarupnanatana Rupa Raghunatha.
Ahaswarupa Sanatana Rupa Raghunatha.
Bhattayuga Shri Jivaha Prabhu Lokanatha
Bhattajuga Shri Jiva Prabhu Lokanatha
Goya Karo Shri Acharya Prabhu Srinivasa
Daya Karo Shri Acharya Prabhu Srinivasa
Ramachandra Shangamage Narottama Dasa
Ramachandra Sangha Mange Narottama Dasa
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna. Shri Advaita Acharya Prabhu ki jai.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Thank you. Thank you, Bhakta Roman, and for joining. And
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. It was really interesting to learn pastimes. It's really new for me, and that was a deep nectar. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Till then, all glories to Srila Advaita Acharya, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, and all glories to Srila Prabhupada's disciples, the Guru Varga of ISKCON, who are keeping the mercy and the flow of compassion of Advaita Acharya Prabhu, and giving on souls like this. So thank you so much. Vanshar kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyaiva cha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo namo namaः. Hare